Hello and welcome to ExegeTV, where we bridge the horizons between the ancient text known as the Bible and today's world. I'm Michael Halcomb. In this episode, which builds on previous episodes of ExegeTV, I want to address the subject of how to understand the Bible. And when I say this, at this point, what I mean is to understand every verse of the Bible that you read. Now, you might be thinking, it's the Bible, well, I'm a Christian, so I should be able to open it up, read it, and understand it. Well, not so quick. Understanding the Bible isn't easy. In fact, I would argue that if you have had no formal education concerning the ancient Mediterranean world and you can open up the Bible and understand it, then you're probably misreading it. Understanding the Bible always takes work. Always. It's not as easy as just opening it up and getting it. You have to understand every word and every verse against its ancient social background and context. So I want to help you in just a few moments begin to be able to do that. I could start by listing any number of books such as those written by authors like Bruce Molina and John Pilch and Douglas Oakman and Richard Rohrbaugh and Peter Botha or Carolyn Osiek, among others. Feel free actually to look up any of those names on Amazon.com or other book sites or other bookstores, because you'll find those works dealing with the social context and background of antiquity. It's a great starting point. But here's what I want to do. I want to remind you that when you're reading the Bible, and I stress the word after here, after you determine the genre of the passage, so you have to do that first. After you determine the genre of the passage you're reading, for example, is it poetry, is it history, is it parable, is it genealogy, and so on and so forth, then you should begin asking questions about the social context of each word and even each verse. Some questions you might ask, for example, would be, does the social context of this verse that I'm reading come from or have to do with ancient politics? Or does it come from the social sphere or the religious guilds or settings of that day? Does it have any affiliation with the economic arena in antiquity? Is there an ethical bent to this certain word or this verse? Is this passage suggesting something theological or spiritual? Maybe a spiritual practice like fasting or praying, etc. Is there a moral debate that is centralized in the passage, that's focused on in the passage? And if so, why is it there and what's going on? So actually, let's explore a passage just to try this kind of questioning method out, questioning about the social context and background. So let's just think together real quickly about Mark 1, 16 through 18, for example. These verses say this: As Jesus walked beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and his brother Andrew casting a net into the lake. I'm reading out of the TNIV here. For they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. At once, they left their nets and they followed him. So let's just ask some questions of this text. For instance, could this text have anything to do with politics? Or could it have any implications? Could it have had any implications in the ancient world? Well, it doesn't seem like a very political text. I mean, it's Jesus walking beside the Sea of Galilee and calling Simon and his brother Andrew to come follow him to fish for people. It doesn't seem to have any political bent to it, but let's think a bit more about it. Remember, Jesus is walking beside a lake. And around the lake, there are tax booths. And actually in Mark 2, the next chapter, we're going to meet one of these guys, Levi, who was actually running one of these tax booths around the lake. Now, why are there tax booths around the lake, you might ask? Well, it was kind of like going to fish at a pay lake today. You pay to rent a boat, you pay to fish from the shore, but you've still got to pay to fish there. Now, the Roman Empire had set up booths like this around the lake. And the fishermen, they had to pay to dock their boats. The fishermen also had to pay a price for each fish they caught. So they were losing a lot of money. They were paying a lot of money to the Roman government. The Roman Empire, on the other hand, they were doing pretty good when it came to money off these fishermen. They were making a lot off of them. Now, imagine that you're the Roman emperor and that this is your lake and that you're the one making the money off of it. But then some guy comes along and he tells all the fishermen, hey, let's go fish somewhere else. Let's fish for people. He starts telling it to a bunch of people, and they actually start listening to him and following him. So how do you, as the emperor, feel? Well, you're probably angry because now you're losing money. The fishermen are leaving, even if only temporarily, and you know what? You're taking a financial hit for it. So you want to shut this Jesus guy up because he's hurting your business when he's doing this. So you see, there are political implications for this text. By calling these fishermen to take a break from fishing for a little bit, Jesus was not only drawing attention to himself, but he was setting himself up in a way to be singled out by the empire. So thus immediately there's political tension between Jesus and the government or the governing officials of his day. And we can ask other questions like, does this text, this passage have anything to do with the religious sects or of Jesus' day, or the religious group of Jesus' day? Well, it's often been said that Jesus' practice of going out and finding these disciples and calling them to follow him was different from, say, the philosophers or the rabbis of his day. Generally, students in the ancient world sought out their teacher, not the other way around. So this could send us into asking questions about religious leaders and their practices of that time and why maybe Jesus did some things different, or maybe why he did some things similarly. Well, what about economics? Does this have any economic tint to it? We've already touched on that a little bit when we talked a minute ago about the political sphere. It certainly does have economic themes running through it, or factors pertaining to the ancient economy. What about morality? Well, some have said that Jesus called the disciples away from their jobs and their families here. Others have said that if you're one of Jesus' followers, then you should do the same. Some have used texts like this to actually leave their spouses or to leave their families, to say that God is calling them away from their spouses. But really, these verses don't say any of these things. Instead, all Jesus does is call his disciples away for short missionary trips. He already knew these guys, as the Gospel of John tells us. They were John's disciples beforehand, who had already seen Jesus, who had heard of Jesus. And when John was arrested in Mark 1:14 and 15, Jesus comes and gets these guys, and they go follow Jesus, whom John preached of. But they didn't leave their families for good. They didn't leave their children, their wives, their spouses. They didn't leave their jobs for good. No, we see them going to their family homes throughout Mark's story. We see them using their fishing boats again. We see them fishing again. All throughout Mark and the other gospel accounts. These stories don't say that it's okay or that it's moral to leave your family or desert your loved ones. A proper reading actually kind of says the opposite. So there are other questions we could ask, but I'm going to pause there for now. But it's imperative that when you read any verse of Scripture that you do three things. One, you determine the genre of what you're reading. Two, you read the surrounding verses. So for instance, if you're going to go just look up one verse, you need to read the verses that come before that and after that. And thirdly, you need to ask questions about the social context of what you're reading. So if you have any thoughts, comments, or questions, let me know. If you need help with anything, studying, let me know that as well. Blessings to you, and I hope this helps.